This week's poses is going to be broken up into two separate videos. The first one is going to be warming poses, and then some of the warrior standing poses, balancing poses, which should be accessible for everybody. But then the second half in a separate video is going to go down two paths, one for people who want to continue using a chair, not getting down on the floor, and others who want a slightly challenging or more challenging way of doing those same kinds of poses. So we're going to start standing in our mountain pose. We want the inner edges of our feet parallel. We'll curl our toes under, roll to the outside of our feet, and then spread our toes, roll toward the inside of our feet so that we're feeling the edges before we straighten out. We'll rock from the heel to the ball of the foot, feeling the front and the back. And then as we plant the feet, lift up the toes, spread them wide, drop them down. We'll lift to the arches of the feet. We'll tighten the quadriceps. We're thinking about picking up the shoulders, rolling them down and back, stretching as high as we can toward the sky. We can leave our arms resting at our side or turn the palms forward in our Varada Mudra, that yoga symbol of compassion and welcoming. We're going to tune into our breath, as we always do at our start, thinking that concentration on the inhale and the exhale brings us to a greater state of peace. As we inhale, we think about moving in a wave-like motion, belly going out away from our spine, then lifting and opening wide and the rib cage lift through the chest before that wave rolls back down over the next incoming wave. We can practice our Ujjayi breath, making that audible exhale as if we were fogging up a mirror. Not trying to force the breath in any way, recognizing that one breath may be longer or shorter than the next, shallower or deeper. Just tuning into the feeling of the breath. Looking inward for our strength and our serenity. As we start our warm-up, we're slowly going to lift our chin up to the sky, and then when we're ready for our exhale, we'll drop the chin down toward our chest without moving the shoulders in any way. Just trying to get the kinks out of the back of our neck, loosen up a little bit through the upper shoulders. So it could be a short lift or a high lift, depending on the length of our breath, flexibility through the cervical spine. And now we will add shoulder rolls. So as we start lifting our chin, we're going to roll our shoulders forward and then up as high as we can to our ears. As we drop our chin down toward our chest, we'll roll those shoulders behind us down toward the floor. Continuing to concentrate on our breath. And then we'll reverse direction. This time lifting the shoulders back when we inhale and then dropping chin and shoulders to the floor as we roll them forward. And now we'll go into our breath of joy, loosening up our arms in all directions. So with a deep inhale, we'll flex our arms side to the sky, abduct them out to the side, adduct them together in the front, and then extend them behind us. If we'd like to add a little bit of a bend through the knee every time we start our movement, we can do that to help loosen up to the legs as well as the arms. And if we'd like to take ourselves to a forward fold when we extend our arms, we can get a little bit more loosening up through the hips, the knees, the ankles. Stretch a little bit more through the hamstrings, glutes, muscles of the lower back. Now we're going to step our feet a comfortable distance apart. It doesn't have to be very far, but if we want a little more stretch, we can widen that distance. Both feet pointed toward the front. We're just going to rock backward and forward. As we come forward, we're going to lift up our back heel. As we rock back, we're going to plant that heel, lift up the toes of the front foot. Nice slow inhale up, and then exhaling and settling back. We can add an arm movement Swinging back as we drop the hips. If we want to open our fingers as we come forward and then make a fist as we come back, those of us who have tightness, stiffness, arthritis in the hands will feel a benefit from this. Then we'll hold the pose. Settling back into our hips as low as we can, flexing that front foot, maybe grabbing on with our hands, seeing if we can pull it back a little bit more to get more stretch around the back of the ankle, into the calf muscle, and then planting that foot flat on the floor. Standing up tall as we lift our back heel. If we'd like, stretching even higher to the sky by bringing the arms up and out. And then dropping our hands to the floor so we can do all of those on the opposite side. So again, we're just doing a comfortable distance apart, maybe just a teeny bit, maybe a lot. Going forward, lifting up the back heel, and then settling back, lifting up the front toes. Adding our arm swing if we'd like. And again, if we want to go from open fingers to closed fist, that helps bring more warmth, blood flow through the joints of the fingers. As we come back, we'll settle in, pushing the hips lower and lower into the floor. Tightening abdominals, trying to get a little bit more of the torso down to the ground. Maybe grabbing onto the toes of the front foot so that we can really stretch down to the back of the heel into the lower leg. And then coming forward. Lifting the back heel. Lengthening through the spine if we'd like, arms up and over the top. Dropping our hands to our side. We're going to stand sideways, and we're going to think about pointing our toes toward the outside. We're going to take a test to make sure as we start coming into a squat that the middle of the knee is going over the middle toe. We're going from our 5-pointed star, stretching hands high to the sky, and then coming into a squat, bringing our hands around as far as we can to our shoulders. 5-pointed star, hands to shoulders. This might be just a little bit of a cross at the wrist or the elbows, or if we can, fingertips all the way over to the opposite shoulder. Trying to trade which arm is underneath each time. Now we're going to keep our squat. We're going to turn our palms up, bring our hands out to either side, maybe elbows tight or straight out. We're going to think about trying to challenge the strength of the lower legs a little more so we can keep one foot planted on the floor, lift the opposite heel, or lift both of them together. If we're choosing only one, we're going to make sure we switch. Do a couple more breaths on the opposite side. Then planting our feet flat on the floor. We're going to keep comfortable distance. We might want to wiggle our feet a little bit further out toward the outside, but this time we want our toes directly forward, or maybe even slightly inward. We're going to be doing some side lunges. So as we push into one leg, we bend over toward the opposite side, putting a bend in the knee, but not pulling that knee forward. Exhaling to center. We're going to add some arm movement. So with our side lunge, we come into our cactus arms, our wing, coming back to prayer, bringing the arms together in front. Nice slow exhale, deep breath in. Now we're going to add a side bend. So as we start leaning our head over to the side, we're going to bring the opposite arm up and over the top. Again, we can do that fingers open. Fist as we come back. Or we can just keep it in the same steady motion. We're bending the knee right over the ankle. We're pushing out with our top hand to see how much lift we can get through the shoulders. Now we're going to take this to a twist, remembering that we always start with that pulse on the opposite hip, then corkscrew motion through the ribcage to the belly, bending the knee as deeply as we'd like, both hands to that thigh, coming back towards center. Another time out to the side, pushing into our long leg. This time, if we want to go a little bit deeper, we can take that far hand and bring it all the way down to the floor on the outside of our foot. Or we can continue just to leave the hands down on our thigh. Now we'll switch to the opposite side. So just starting with a gentle lunge out to the side, maybe adjusting our feet closer together and further apart. Now our wing and prayer. And now to our side bends. And our twist, starting through the hip on the long leg, rotating through belly, hands just down to our thigh for a start. Back to center on our exhale, nice slow inhale as we move to the side. And continuing this way or coming further forward so we can plant our hand all the way down to the floor. And then coming back towards center, we're going to get ready to go into our warrior poses. We're going to start with our warrior 1.5. So we're going to turn to the side with our foot directly forward. Our back leg is going to have the heel up, both feet pointed in the same direction. We're trying to drop the hips as low as possible, trying to keep the shoulders stacked over the hips, trying to really push down through that heel but not touching the floor, being up on the ball of the foot so that we can get a really good stretch on the soleus, tibialis, Achilles tendon. If we'd like, we can bring our arms up in a straight to the sky. A little more challenging to our balance and our core strength. And now switching to our warrior 1. Virabhadrasana Eka. Front knee and ankle are going to be in alignment. We check to make sure we can see our big toe. Back foot is planted totally on the floor. Heel outer edge touching. We can walk the feet a little bit further apart if we want to put more of a bend in that front knee. Or we can bring our feet closer together. But now we're going to make sure that the midline of our body is lining up with the front leg on the inside. We keep our shoulders stacked over our hips, making sure our spine is nice and neutral. We'll bring our arms out to either side, stretch high to the sky. But now we're going to work on our rotator cuff muscles. At the same time, we're building up strength in the ankles, knees, and hips. So we're going to go to our cactus arms on either side. And then inhaling, keeping the elbows bent, just bringing the fingertips together overhead. Opening out to the side, together again, out to the side. Now we're going to bring our hands in prayer position, Anjali Mudra in front. We're going to take this to a twist, out toward our bent leg. If we'd like, we can do a gentle version by placing our hands on our thigh. Or a little more challenging to keep the hands together in front of our heart. Either way, we're going to press hard into our back leg, pulse on this hip, rotate through the belly. Then we start working that corkscrew up to the rib cage, pulling that top shoulder back as far as we can. So it's either hands just staying on our thigh, or if we'd like, bringing that elbow down toward our thigh, but not sagging into the pose. So we're using our core strength. And we're lifting that torso as high as we can, so we're bringing our heart as close as possible to the height of our thumb, elbow up to the sky. Trying to turn even more through the top shoulder. And then slowly coming back towards center. We'll stand up tall again and going into our humble warrior. We're going to start with our warrior 1 again and just move with our breath between this and swinging our arms and extension behind us, hinging forward. Might be just a little bit, or we can even bring our rib cage all the way down to our thigh. Just trying to make sure that the muscles of the lower back, the hips are nicely relaxed. Holding our warrior 1 and then swinging our arms around. Tight through the shoulders today. We can just leave our arms out to the side, maybe close, maybe far away. Those of us who are comfortable doing so can interlace our fingers. Pressing into our feet, lengthening through the spine. We do our hip hinge, tightening abdominals, tightening quadriceps, trying to bring our body as low as we can down toward that leg. We'll stop where we feel the muscle stretching, but if we go any further, we're afraid we're going to get into pain. So it might be so that we can actually get our rib cage resting on our thigh, maybe not. But once we have the torso in place, then we see how much stretch we can give across the front of the chest, into the anterior deltoid pectoralis by just letting those hands slowly float upward. And then hands back down. We're going to go into our intense side angle. So we're going to step our feet a little bit closer together, and this time we're going to have both feet pointed directly forward. Might be 2 or 3 feet apart, but we've got our weight back on our heels, balls of the feet. We should be able to pick up our toes. Hands behind us to make sure that we're not going to twist through the hips, that our elbows are evenly out to either side. Length through the entire body before we do our hip hinge, and we slowly come down. We're paying particular attention to what's going on with the hamstring on that front leg. If we can, we'll drop our hands to the floor. And again, thinking about the abdominals, the quadriceps being the ones that get the greatest contraction, get ourselves low into that pose. If we're feeling any over-tension, overstretching on the muscles on the back of the legs, we can either bend that front knee or we can come up a little bit higher again, planting our hands maybe on our shin or even up on our thigh. And then pressing into our feet. We're going to stand up tall. We're going to take ourselves into a couple balancing poses because I am very balance challenged. I need the support of the wall, so I'm going to take my hand against the wall as we go into our airplane. Using our front leg as our balancing leg, lifting through the arch of the foot, tightening quadriceps. We do our hip hinge again until our head is even with our hips, our spine parallel to the floor. Arms out in airplane arms on either side, and picking up the heel on the opposite leg. We'll bring it behind us as far as we can, maybe lifting it off the floor, maybe bringing it up even with our hip, flexing through the heel, pushing through our hands. And then slowly dropping that foot to the floor. Standing up tall, again, those of us who need it can either take the same hand against the wall again, or if you want to try a different way, a different angle of doing this, standing so that the back of the hips is just barely touching the wall. We're going to use the same leg as our balancing leg. This time our arms come out on either side. Flamingo, getting ready to lift off. Same, lifting through the arch of the foot, tightening quad, tightening the abdominals as well, lifting up the heel. And then if we'd like, knee coming off, higher and higher and higher, trying to get it even with our hip if we can, and then pointing the toes of our lifted foot down to the ground. Foot down, hands down. We'll loosen up a little bit by doing our power. Our feet a little bit wider apart than hip width. It's going to be audible exhales, pulling fist into our hips. But we're going to start, first of all, spreading fingers, stretching high. And then building up our energy, increasing our lung capacity, our heart health. And then getting ready to do all our warrior poses on the opposite side. So starting with our lunge again, Anjaneyasana. Distance between the legs is not important, stability is. So if we have our feet fairly close together, that's what we do. If we want to take a deeper stretch, we'll step our feet back as far as we can, as long as we feel as though we're using the muscles but not abusing them. We think about pushing heel as low as we can, pushing hips down into the floor. Lining up our midline with the inside of our front leg. If and when we're ready, arms up to the sky. Then into our warrior one, only adjust that back foot. So we bring our hands down to our thigh for stability. Before we step that foot a little bit closer, so we can turn it at an angle. We keep our midline of our body lined up with the inside of our front leg. We're going to work on those rotator cuff muscles again, so our cactus arms. And this time we're going to rotate Dropping the fingertips down to the floor, palms behind us, and then coming back to our starting pose. And bringing our hands together. We make our decision on our twist, hands just down to our thigh, or keeping our Anjali Mudra. Pressing hard into our back foot, pulsing on that back hip, rotating through the belly, rib cage, heart, turning out to the side, hands on the thigh, checking alignment of the knee and ankle on that front leg. If we'd like, elbow down to our thigh, opposite elbow up to the sky, top shoulder pulling back behind us. And then coming back towards center. Finding our stability. Back into our warrior one. Virabhadrasana Eka. We're making sure our midline's lining up with that front knee, that we're not pulling that knee over toward the back leg. And then taking this to our forward bend, swinging the arms around on either side. Pressing into our feet, tightening our pelvic floor as we lift. Extending arms behind, flexing arms in front, and then holding our humble warrior. And again, it could be just a gentle lift, hands resting on our thigh. We're thinking about real hard push into that back leg to keep the knee as straight as we can without locking it. Coming down slowly, enjoying the journey. Hands may be just resting on our hip. Hands may be far apart. Hands may be interlaced. We do what we can to maximize the work our body's doing without pain, without strain. Thinking that no yoga pose is static, we always try to move a little bit deeper with each breath we take. And then hands down. Coming down to our thighs, we stack shoulders over hips. And then we adjust the distance between our feet a little bit closer together so that we don't strain when we straighten out the front leg. We think about shoulders stacked over hips, keeping the weight off our toes as we do our hip hinge. Coming down slowly, maybe keeping our hands just sitting on our thigh, but never letting them dangle in space. That's all the extra weight of our arms and shoulders pulling on our lower back. We can bring them down to our shin or all the way to the floor. And again, we'll adjust the pose as we need to. If we're getting too much of a stretch, we're going to bend that front knee or bring our hands higher. If we're not getting enough stretch, we're going to think about maybe pushing our hips back a little bit or walking our hands further back toward our back foot. And then walking those hands forward. Using our bandhas here. So we tighten pelvic floor, we tighten the abs as we come up for stability. And we're going into our balancing poses. So it will be our airplane arms out to either side. If we choose, we could take our arms straight forward in our warrior three. A little more challenging to our balance. But we still think about the balancing leg. Lifting through the arch of the foot, tightening quad. Keeping our strength through our core muscles as we do our hip hinge. Head even with our hips. And then as we're ready, lifting that foot behind us. Trying to keep it straight behind the sit bone. And then slowly lowering the foot to the ground. And again, we can turn so that our back is toward the wall, that the back of the hips are just barely touching. Or again, we can use that wall for support by putting one hand against the wall. We're going to keep the same leg as our balancing leg. We're going to pick up the heel of our other foot and then slowly lift that knee till it's even with our hip. Pointing the toes to the floor if we can. Maybe letting go with both hands. Maybe continuing to hold onto the wall with fingertips to keep ourselves in balance. More important, to be getting the muscles to work where we'd like them to be, where they need to learn their strength, rather than being in a pose and constantly wiggling. And we'll stay tuned to the side while we work a little bit on strengthening the muscles of the back. So we check the alignment of the feet. We think about any back bend is going to be that posterior tilt that's going to push the tailbone forward. It's going to take the bony part, iliac crest, up toward the sky. So we make sure that we're going to be pulling the shoulder blades tight together. Most of us will find it easy to put our fists on the back of our hips or palms against kidneys as their start. But now as we make length from our pubic bone to our belly button, with the tailbone pushing forward, we lift then up to the solar plexus, up to the heart. We watch the bend in the neck, making sure we're not overarching to the neck. Maybe the heels just a teensy bit further apart so that we can get a better movement of the head of the femur and the hip socket. If we'd like, we can release the arms, bring them out and up. But we're still making sure we don't sink in the lower part of the back, that we continue to lift high. And then slowly dropping our arms around to our side. And loosening up a bit before we go on to the second part. Maybe shaking out our arms back and forth. Lifting up the heel of one foot, turning some circles. Doing the same thing on the opposite side. And then a little bit of hip circles as if we were playing with a hula hoop. Just wiggling around through the midsection. To loosen up the muscles of the leg and back, we'll reverse direction. And then get ready to come either seated on a chair or come down so that we can come into a down dog and start working on upper body strength. Then working on more stretches through the legs, increasing back strength, shoulder, arms, legs. So until you start the next video, stretching high to the sky, palms out to the side. Namaste. Let's continue in a moment.